I want to be #1. How's that? Short and simple enough for you? Could be dangerous. Could totally suck. Let the bloodshed begin.
SUDA51 is a game maker that I absolutely adore. Not only are his games both visually and mechanically distinct, but his journey from funeral director to one of the biggest names in the gaming market is a truly inspiring one. At every evolutionary turn the gaming world takes, be it battle royales or immersive first-player experiences, SUDA is right there walking in the opposite direction. His success is wholly unique, not piggybacking off trends or appealing to common denominators, but through genius design and valuing enjoyable gameplay above all else. And no game of his accurately portrays this more than his shining gem No More Heroes. To understand what makes No More Heroes so great, we need to start back at the beginning. In the early 90s, Goichi Suda was working as a funeral director when he responded to a job listing for a game developer on a wrestling game at Human Entertainment. From a young age, Suda aspired to design games, and through his extensive wrestling knowledge, was able to land the job. His first titles, Super Fire Pro Wrestling 3 Final Bout and Super Fire Pro Wrestling Special, were lauded for their deep wrestling gameplay and surprisingly emotional stories. This landed Suda further jobs at Human, until he was inspired to establish his own company, Grasshopper Manufacturer, in 1998, due to a lack of creative freedom at his previous studio. The first title received mild success in the East. Reviewers praised its deep, rich story, but the game faltered in its graphics and gameplay. This became somewhat of a trend for Grasshopper's earlier work, due to a lack of manpower and funding. Suda often helmed most projects, acting in many different roles, such as lead writer, designer, and director. While success was hard to find, the studio were able to begin to map out their distinct traits and desires, tell stories that many developers were too scared to tell, and explore themes and ideas often neglected by other forms of media. However, success would come for them in the form of a deal with Capcom. In the early 2000s, Capcom searched for new game projects for which they would overlook in an attempt to bring new IPs to the gaming market, which they viewed as stagnant. They aimed to release 5 games on the GameCube in an attempt to bolster console sales and provide third-party support for the console. One of these 5 games was Killer 7, which Suda to this day considers his proudest achievement. Killer 7 was an amazing game. Finally able to put together all the pieces for Grasshopper, it was able to provide the company the success they deserved, and gave them a foothold into not just the Eastern, but also the Western market. In an interview with Japanese news outlet Den Faminiko Gamer, Suda had this to say regarding Killer 7. The reception from around the world was greater than what we were expecting, and when we completed it, there was a sense that we had made a game that no one had ever seen before. I thought that we had made a game that really fit the word new, and that it was something that would become synonymous with me. With their newfound success, Grasshopper knew that they could take it even further. In 2006, the world got its first look at Project Heroes, and, well, see for yourself. The trailer introduced everyone to Travis Touchdown, an otaku with the worst voice acting since the Legend of Zelda TV show.
Your shining armor and fine words won't get you anywhere.
Well, excuse me, princess.
While not much was shown in the way of gameplay, people were excited to see what Suda would offer up next. And after a year of waiting, No More Heroes released worldwide in 2007, and it was an instant cult classic. Well, in the West, that is. In the game's first 3 months in the Japanese market, the game had only sold 40,000 copies. In a launch event for the game, Suda sat in a shopping center for over 20 minutes, only for not a single person to get the game signed. A Famitsu reporter had to go up himself just so they can get a photo for the article. This dire reception from Eastern fans was most likely a result of the casual audience for the Wii, with Suda himself stating in an interview, "No More Heroes, unlike a lot of Nintendo Wii titles currently available, is the kind of product which will attract a different kind of consumer to the hardware, i.e. gamers who are looking for a different genre to the products which have been successful on the platform thus far." However, in the West, it was a completely different story. In both European and North American regions, the game sold way over what Grasshopper expected, becoming a hit with fans around the world. But what made the game more appealing to Western audiences? Well, to answer that question, we need to finally delve into No More Heroes and explore the world of Santa Destroy. The protagonist of No More Heroes is more than just a breakout character. Without Travis Touchdown, No More Heroes wouldn't be the successful series we know today. With his love of moe culture, nonsensical personality, and a distinct design, it's no wonder he's become a fan favorite. Inspired by SUDA's favorite film Paris, Texas, which has a main character named Travis, he has also been described by SUDA as a modern-day Jedi. Travis, as well as the entirety of No More Heroes, is heavily inspired by cult references to films and other media which SUDA loves. The name itself, No More Heroes, is based off an album by the same name, by the Stranglers. This really is common for SUDA, as his other games follow a similar naming method. Killer is Dead is named after an album by the Smiths, titled The Queen is Dead. While game names often have very little impact on the game itself, SUDA often chooses these names early in development, shaping the game around them. And there's no clearer example than No More Heroes. Travis is everything but a hero. He is driven purely by sexual desires, murders to get what he wants, and shows little in the way of compassion to his victims. Every action he takes screams his virgin-esque personality. The way he waddles down the street, his expressive movement as he reloads his katana, and his constant affection on women can make playing him a jarring experience for anyone over the age of 12. But there's also a certain charm to Travis that makes him undeniably lovable. The way he interacts with the other characters around him shows who Travis really is. Not to say he isn't a virgin-esque egotistical asshole, but he is also an insanely driven person. He wants nothing more than to become the #1 assassin, to the point where it's infectious. Furthermore, he is voiced to a T. Robin Atkin Downs, the voice actor for Travis, gives every single line 100%. From
Fuckhead!
To
I hope your next dream is a more pleasant one.
it really adds to the clearly distinct personality you play as in No More Heroes, and as I said before, it really wouldn't be the same without him. The same can also be said for the other characters in the story of NMH. Firstly, the main driving factor and personal love interest of Travis, Sylvia Crystal, is an excellently written character. While her personality screams typical anime tsundere at the beginning, as you get further into the game, the layers begin to peel back. She is a con artist, and at every single twist and turn, she is there to provide either intense comic relief or to drive Travis, and by extension the player, forward. Interactions with her are brief, at most before and after a mission, but it's in these periods that she has a strong impression. Whether she's at a club or a massage, she tethers the world of No More Heroes to the greater world around it. The other characters, mainly consisting of the 10 ranked assassins you must make your way through, are certainly an eclectic bunch. Ranging from karaoke-loving gunslinger to schoolgirl ninja, each of these ranked fights feels amazing to get to, and that's almost entirely due to their amazing characterization. From their voice acting to their backstory, you become incredibly invested in them in a short space of time, so much so you almost feel bad for having to kill them. The plot of No More Heroes is almost as nonsensical as the characters within. With an expository cutscene, we learn that Travis met Crystal at a bar, and in order to impress her and to make some money, he kills the 11th highest ranked assassin in Santa Destroy. This now makes him the 11th highest ranked assassin, and thus begins his journey to #1, and his desire for doing so, to have sex with Sylvia. This single desire is enough to force Travis to go through murdering hundreds, being attacked and nearly killed multiple times, until he finally reaches the final fight against the highest ranked assassin. This is where Travis learns that he actually had a younger sister, Jean, who is now #1, and who killed their parents when they were younger. Travis is able to kill Jean, placing him at the top of the assassins in Santa Destroy. The plot may be the driving factor for Travis, but for the player, it's the fluid, expressive combat. Travis's trusty beam katana, which is a clear spoof of a lightsaber, has 2 different attacks, high and low. As the player, you have to use whichever height is most applicable to the moment, as enemies can block either high or low as well. Similarly, Travis can also block, although this is a lot more simplistic. Simply locking in on one enemy will allow Travis to block all of their attacks, as long as he isn't attacking at the same time. This allows the focus to be mainly placed on attacking rather than defending, but I do feel that in its simplicity, difficulty is lost, especially when it comes to the simple one-on-one duels during the ranked fights. combat also utilizes the Wiimote signature feature, motion controls. Once an enemy is low enough, Travis enters slow motion, and the player has to swing the Wiimote in a designated motion to produce a gruesome kill. These moments are quick, simple, and highly effective in adding an unmatched spectacle to each fight, and the essentially quick-time events keep the player engaged in the sometimes button-mashy combat. Furthermore, whenever each of these stylish kills happen, a slot machine is spun, and its results can cause a special effect for Travis. This could be invincibility, slow motion, or even a third-person shooter mode. While this luck-based mechanic can also cause fights to be over in a second, therefore reducing the skill required, I actually really like these, mainly due to their presentation. Travis screams a random series of words along the lines of and the screen changes to reflect the abilities such as black and white for slow motion. They also happen infrequently enough that they can't be crushed upon during the more difficult fights. Spectacle can also be found through the wrestling moves available to Travis. After breaking an enemy's block using a swift punch or kick, Travis can throw them in a wide variety of ways. This is where SUDA's extensive knowledge on wrestling clearly inspired combat. Unlocked through wrestling masks found around levels or videotapes rented from the video store, Travis can produce moves such as suplexes and pile drives on stunned enemies, requiring a more complex motion to pull off. If done successfully, it leaves enemies primed for a simple finishing move on the ground, and can provide a major damage source against the ranked assassins. Overall, combat is varied and enjoyable, and a true expression of Travis and SUDA in the fullest sense. The structure of No More Heroes is incredibly simplistic. However, this certainly isn't to its detriment. The general gameplay loop goes as follows. You take part in a boss fight against one of the top 10 assassins, climbing up the ranks as you go along. In between these missions, you have to take part in jobs that you can find in the small open world, ranging from typical odd jobs such as mowing grass, to killing a certain number of enemies in a designated time frame. This is all to earn enough money to enter the next boss fight, and so on and so forth. This makes progression incredibly easy to not only track, but also makes it satisfying to achieve. Knowing how far you have to go to reach the top keeps the ultimate end goal firmly placed at the forefront of the experience, and the open world sections act as a break in between. Both are equally as important to the overall experience, but both also have their strengths and weaknesses. Let's start with the open world, as there's somewhat lots to unpack in a somewhat tiny world. Santa Destroy can be crossed end to end in mere minutes, thanks to Travis's trusty, oversized motorbike, which is certainly overcompensating for something. It can be cooled to the player's will, and thank God, as travelling on foot is painfully slow. The bike moves at a reasonable speed, though that's not its major issue. Controlling it feels stiff and unresponsive. Turning around corners feels like a guessing game, but I think that may be the point. The bike has an interesting mechanic, where the boost is completely refilled whenever you drift. While this sounds like a simple Mario Kart spoof, it works a little differently here. The bike can only turn a minimum of 90 degrees, meaning you often overshoot it when it comes to taking corners. However, when the feel of the bike is got down to a T, it can be incredibly satisfying to drive. Rhythmically boosting and drifting around the American blocks is a short thrill, making crossing the bland streets somewhat better. The streets are just too lifeless though. There's an occasional pedestrian or car, but these act as robotic as they look. You simply phase through people, yet hit small cars like they're a truck. Their only real purpose is obstacles as you move from job to job, but from a game with this much style, I feel like it's a massive missed opportunity. People could be high-fiving Travis, cars could honk as you fly past them, anything to really give the world a purpose or sense of personality. Thankfully though, the jobs you complete don't falter in the same way. Jobs are accessed through two different avenues. The Job Center, where you complete simple jobs that have nothing to do with combat, and assassination contracts, where combat is all you can do. You have to complete the simple Job Center chore first after each ranked fight in order to unlock the assassination contracts, which is typically where the big money is made. While doing chores like removing graffiti and filling up cars sounds tedious, I actually really love them. They feel like they're the only part of the game tethered to the real world, and their inclusion heavily contrasts the over-the-top nature the rest of the game thrives off. They also added a nice break from combat, giving you small tasks which require just enough brainpower to complete, and at least a few laughs along the way. The assassination contracts are also very simplistic, relying completely on the game's combat to provide any sense of enjoyment. Most consist of killing a select number of low health enemies or killing one stronger one. They also often take place in the same locations as previous ranked fights, reusing the same enemies and the same mechanics. I don't mind, as the combat is enjoyable enough no matter who or where you're slicing, but some interesting one-off locales could have been nice. Also in the open world, there's shops and establishments where you can unlock new items or other bits and bobs. For example, you can go to the gym to learn new combos through button mashing minigames. There's also clothes shops, weapon shops, and places to do other goofy activities. These add lots to the identity of the open world. It isn't just filler, a means to get from point A to point B. It's part of the central identity of No More Heroes, and although lots of it I have issues with, it wouldn't be the same game without it. In the No More Heroes motel is where Travis stays, and from within his room the player can actually do a lot. Functionally, this is where players can change their clothes, weapon, and look at the map, but that's not it. Players can also play with Travis's cat, watch videotapes that they rent, and look through the collectible cards they can find throughout the world. This is also where the player can save, by sitting on the toilet of course. Lastly, Travis can listen to his voicemails, which tell the story of a sex-obsessed client who always forgets to return his videotapes. It's great. Okay, so what about the ranked fights? In total, there's 10 of them, each escalating in scale and in difficulty. With a central driving motivation for Travis to become number 1, it's incredibly easy for the player to get involved in this desire, as you too want to be the best. It is only through this that the player can actually see the interesting diverse selection of assassins that you have to fight. Each assassin is wholly unique, in design, mechanics, and location. This makes them all memorable in their own way. In order to get to them, you have to make your way through their specific location, which often has its own mechanics to deal with. Let's go through each of these assassins, as they are what really makes up No More Heroes. The moment you're dropped into the game, you instantly are on your way to fight the first ranked fight, against number 10, Death Metal. Death Metal. To get to him, you have to make your way through a lavish mansion, which heavily contrasts with Travis's rundown motel. The fight is a simple one-on-one, with no major gimmicks or mechanics to tend with. This all acts as a good, simple tutorial level, as the player is still getting to grips with the mechanics and controls of the game. Number 9 in the UAA ranking is Dr. Peace. Dr. Peace. Listen to my song. You have to fight through a stadium full of baseball players, which occasionally challenge Travis to a batting minigame in order to kill them. The fight against Dr. Peace itself also isn't too complicated, though he uses a mix of close range attacks and shots from his golden revolver. Before the fight, however, we get more backstory behind the character, mainly about his love of karaoke and his estranged daughter. Overall, the fight is a very enjoyable one, and sets the tone for the fights to come. Rank 8 is against Shinobu, a katana-wielding schoolgirl.
What's that in your hand? A toy?
As you may have guessed, you have to fight your way through a school of enemies to get to her. The fight itself might be the most enjoyable, as Shinobu puts up a much greater threat than the 2 previous ones. This makes the duel tense, with her constant combos and ranged slashes keeping the player on their toes. Upon defeating Shinobu, Travis decides to spare her life, due to her supposedly being too weak. More likely, however, it's because she is a young girl, which Travis finds difficult to kill due to his love of young girls. Destroy Man takes the 7th spot. Destroy Man.
Come and get some fun.
Also ushering in gimmicks into the boss fight itself. Getting to him is the simplest of them all, simply fighting through large rooms of enemies on empty movie sets. The fight itself, however, decides to throw a few curveballs at the player. He announces all of his attacks just like that of a movie star, allowing for the player to easily dodge them ahead of time. At the halfway point though, he begins to comically fly up, using a harness typical of a movie. The player then has to destroy electricity boxes in order to get him back down to the ground. While this isn't a crazy gimmick, it does help to freshen up what would have otherwise been an incredibly easy fight. The 6th ranked assassin is Holly Summers. Holly Summers.
Still just a bug.
Who has the most annoying gimmick by far. Getting to her is also annoying. You have to fight enemies along the beach, but around there are also landmines which you have to contend with. During the fight, you have to dodge completely hidden holes, which Summers can dig and re-hide whenever she wants. She also has auto-tracking missiles and grenades, which are just a pain to dodge. The fight overall isn't too bad, but some annoying mechanics do put a damper on it. Travis is also unable to kill her, due to her being a woman, but she decides that she would rather literally eat a grenade than lose to him. Summers teaches Travis that no matter the person, an assassin must be killed once defeated, which has major repercussions later in the story. The 5th ranked fight, if you can even call it that, is by far the worst in every sense. You have to walk down this incredibly long corridor chasing a shadowed figure, killing an occasional higher health enemy along the way. This area, while incredibly bland to look at and traverse, goes on for way too long to be enjoyable. Having to watch Travis slowly pace down this corridor for a good 10 minutes is mind-numbing to say the least. But after all that, the 5th ranked assassin, Let Shake, gets murdered before you can even fight him. A mysterious man called Henry slices him into pieces before he can even activate his massive killing machine, and then the player isn't even allowed to fight Henry, at least not yet. I understand that this was done in order to set up the rivalry between Henry and Travis, but after such a long, boring lead-up area, it's just a sour cherry on top. SUDA himself even admitted to it being cut due to time constraints rather than an intentional design choice, and sadly that really shines through here. Thankfully, the 4th ranked fight is a lot better.
Let's see what you're made of, country boy.
The lead up to it is also very different, letting you play a Space Invaders-esque minigame after Travis falls asleep on the train. In this magic-themed fight, Harvey can flip the player's screen upside down and attack using his dual katanas. He also has, to my knowledge, the first instant kill move of the game. Travis is thrown into a magic box, and the player has to complete the right action in order to escape. These gimmicks are not only fun spins on the traditional combat, but also feel perfectly in theme with the level itself. This is a prime example of where No More Heroes is able to nail the dual fight, giving it a memorable theme and opponent with a distinguishing mechanic. Sadly, the same can't be said for the rank 3 fight.
Fuck you little prick.
In order to fight Speedbuster, the 76-year-old woman with a massive laser, you have to dodge into the houses along the sides of the arena just to get close enough to destroy her laser and cut her head off. It's a very simple fight with a really boring mechanic, and a real shame being put this high up on the assassin's ranking. No worries though, because the penultimate ranked fight is also the perfect amalgamation of everything that makes these No More Heroes duels so fun.
You think you're sad, don't ya?
Also taking place in the stadium, Travis must now drive around the pitch where he murdered Dr. Peace, running over the same baseball players using his oversized bike. When he actually gets into the fight arena, he must fight Bad Girl, an alcoholic young woman with a baseball bat. Her attacks are sporadic and unpredictable. She also has many gimmicks which greatly summarize her personality and fighting style. Firstly, she can launch gimped criminals at Travis, which turn into ads which fight alongside her. She can also drop onto the ground crying, which she can be faking or real, and if the player interacts with a fake her, they will be instantly killed. And finally, when she's on low health, she sets her bat on fire using her alcohol, increasing its range and widening her attack list. Bad Girl is not only an amazing character, but her combat style is also the most fun to fight in the game. Well, apart from the number 1 rank, that is.
Welcome to my castle.
Getting to the final boss fight is sadly disappointing. Travis's bike gets stolen, and he has to very slowly waddle across Sand to Destroy to get it back. When he does, he engages in a car chase along a motorway. While this sounds cool, in practice it's just clunky and disappointing. The other drivers get knocked off with the smallest of touches, and controlling the bike along a straight road is very tedious. After it's all over, you have to make your way through a forest, with the ghost of Travis's previous mentor guiding the player along. This section is also just very weird and sadly disappointing. The enemies are massive health sponges, and you just simply follow where the weird looking ghost points to. No matter though, because with that out the way, you get to fight the game's final boss, Darkstar. Oh, the real final boss of the game turns out to be Jean, Travis's estranged half-sister and former love interest. There's a lot to unpack with this boss, so let's just start with the fight itself. Jean is very difficult to hit, able to dodge most of your attacks unless you do them quickly after hers or interrupting her attacks. She also has very long combos, which can be punishing at first, but after a few minutes, they become easy to read. As the fight goes on, the arena gets smaller and smaller, making it hard to dodge her incredibly quick attacks. Overall, she's an incredibly fair fight. No bullshit gimmicks, no instant kill moves, just a simple one-on-one to the death, and it's really refreshing. The other part of the fight is the backstory, and boy is it confusing and plentiful. Thankfully though, SUDA decides to just speed through it all, literally. While this is good and all for the sake of the plot and to actually get into the fight faster, I feel as though a lot of the emotional tension between Travis and Jean makes no sense without it. But as I say in the game, it would really up the age rating and also give YouTube a heart attack if I were to repeat it. And it's really a shame. Had SUDA found a way to include this into the game, albeit in a more PG-friendly way, players could have become more invested in the conflict between these two characters. As it stands, however, it lacks any sense of tension, as the relationship between them is nothing more than any of the other ranked assassins. As an experience, No More Heroes feels the most SUDA-like out of Grasshopper's catalogue of games that I've played, and that's mainly due in part to their obvious use of homage and inspirations. As SUDA said before, when you take a shit, everything you've consumed is all mixed together. There are all sorts of things in that, and that's the same kind of idea, I think. Everywhere you look in No More Heroes, there's a reference. An obvious one is Star Wars, from the literal beam swords, the exact same credit style, and Darkstar saying to Travis,
I am your true father.
But there's also smaller ones, like the motel being inspired by the one from Memento, and the collectible Lovikov balls being named after the titular artifacts from Dragon Ball. However, SUDA is able to fill No More Heroes to the brim with these references without making it feel incoherent or messy, but instead enjoyable to find all the nods and Easter eggs to different works. No More Heroes is definitely rough around the edges, but in a way, it's what gives it its charm. Voice lines are repeated thousands of times, some character models are very stiff, and as I said before, the bike is really not the best. This was all known by SUDA during development, but as he stated in interviews, I wanted to do more, but we didn't have the time and the budget wasn't that big. That was a limit of what we could do. In all honesty, I have very little gripes about hearing Travis say after every kill, although I can definitely see why the bike was removed from the sequel. While it's clear many ideas and aspects were constrained or left on the cutting room floor, it doesn't diminish the game's overall experience, rather it leaves the players wondering what could have been. SUDA is a game maker known for its overarching themes and deep stories, told through unconventional means. No More Heroes certainly fits that bill, in the truest sense of the word. The game constantly satirizes the idea of a hero, what it means to be a hero, and what their true desires are. That's why the name itself is so fitting. In the real world, there aren't any heroes, at least not anymore. Travis is just a loser, like the player supposedly is. A game-loving, girl-obsessed, anime-addicted loser living on the edge of poverty. And while that seems like a rude assessment, I think that's the point. Travis's intention to have sex with Sylvia is just a more realistic, true version of the typical hero's journey. The same could be said for his climb to number 1, which leaves a trail of clearly unnecessary bloodshed in its wake. Each of the assassins you fight play on the player's expectations about them to attempt to question the player's position in this harsh journey. Dr. Peace wants nothing more than to reconnect with his daughter, but because of you, that's never going to happen. Holly Summers just wants to be remembered and honored, something that Travis and by extension the player cannot do. The harsh reality of No More Heroes is symbolized no clearer than in Travis, who after all the game's hardships is now stuck in a perpetual cycle of having to defend his newly acquired top spot, even after his true desire has gone. Travis's story isn't a sad one, it's just a realistic one set in a cruel, over-the-top, unrealistic world. No More Heroes is one of the best experiences you can have on the Wii, especially barring the console's first-party lineup. SUDA and his team at Grasshopper were able to finally hit their stride, prove to everyone that their success on Killer 7 wasn't a fluke, and were able to cement their place in the Western gaming market. The question of why No More Heroes appeal to more of a Western market isn't a simple one. One answer could be that it's a result of violence and gore being more accepted into Western media, though I feel the answer may be more rooted in the culture itself. The overarching themes present in No More Heroes hit a lot closer to home for many in the West, with a large overabundance of hero-related media flooding the big and small screen every year. Not only this, but the game is set in California, with most references being to that of popular Western media such as Star Wars, making its themes and ideas more apparent and resonant. For many, No More Heroes was an entry point into the wacky world of SUDA51, and really no game summarizes his style more. While it may not be perfect, No More Heroes is truly a genre and console defining game. Whether or not SUDA kept up this standard of quality in the sequels is a video for another day. Thanks for watching.
Fuckhead!